Hey everyone, welcome back to Citywide Bytes. I'm your host, Max Bowen. In this episode, I'm talking to author Perrin Pring for her recently released book, Cash and Gravity, set in a world where everyone's trying to get off it as soon as possible. We're going to talk all about the world building and character creation that went into this, as well as the many rewrites it went through over the years and how the story changed as a result. Perrin also talks a little shop, giving her advice to fellow debut writers, among that being stay in school. Enjoy! All right. Well, Perrin, I want to say first off, thank you very much for joining us. I am very interested in talking about your book, Cash and Gravity, just released actually a little while ago. But to start with, why don't we just kind of walk through what this one's all about?
Cool. Well, thank you. I'm also excited to be here. Cash and Gravity, they're billing it as a near future sci-fi thriller. And it presumes that the American government has kind of crumbled and corporations have taken its place. And we are at the place in humanity where we really want to get into space more full time, but we're not really there technologically speaking. So each corporation is trying to develop their own technology to get into space, and that's the time period that this centers on. And one corporation will steal mines for resources from another corporation, and they'll steal it back and forth. And the main character, her name is Chevy, and she is a Marine in one of these corporations, militaries, and her whole job is just to um, drop into these mine sites, overtake them for the corporation, and then, she just gets sent somewhere else. And so one day when she's doing this, she comes across a nearly dead super soldier who has the world's first and only mobile fusion device. And this can change everything because obviously power and fuel is a big concern when trying to launch stuff into space. So whoever owns this device kind of owns the future. And the problem is her corporation stole it from another one. So she's got to get it to a safe house, and she embarks on a low-tech road trip across the American West with this device. And if she fails, she dies.
I like it. I like
Thank
it.
you.
All right, let us talk settings then, because I like the notion of like corporations taking over the world. How far are we from that? Hard to say, actually, but what kind of world building though went into this? Because we're talking about like the collapse of the government, the mega corporations taking everything over.
Yeah, it's funny because I started writing this in 2020 and then it sold in 2025, and I don't think that that's like just like some random coincidence. So I think, yeah, definitely the state of the world influenced that people might be interested in this. But actually, the world building that went into this is kind of a funny story. I mean, as mentioned, I'm a park ranger, and in 2020, we did not have reliable internet, which like a lot of people are like, "What are you talking about?" Right? But we were living in these places that was hard to get internet, and at the time was when Starlink was happening. And my husband and I were driving. We went on a river trip on the Gates of Lador, in starts in Colorado, goes out Utah, and very beautiful through Dinosaur National Monument. Highly recommend seeing that from the river. And while we're driving across Nevada, we started talking. Wouldn't this be crazy if this revolutionized the way that we could communicate? And this seems funny hearing it because most people in 2020 like had the internet, right? But we were still not doing that. And so we were like, if you could get the internet anywhere, that would be crazy. And so then we were on this really long just drive, and if you've ever driven across Nevada, it goes on for a long time, and it's very desolate and austere and beautiful in that way, but it's not like you're like, oh, this is a cool town we're coming up to. You're like, this was a town 40 years ago, and now it's like some foundations. And we just started having this conversation, like, what if, which is how all sci-fi premises are made. And I was like, oh, I could write that book. And then actually, I spent a lot of time researching things like how, you know, how you would put people in space, how you would keep people in space, kind of the orbital mechanics. And most of that actually got cut from the book. And they cut a lot of the world building in favor of accelerating the pacing, which actually I think worked really well. But when I was working this book, my agent when he when we were talking about potentially like him taking me on as a client, he told me, he was like, "Well, I don't rep sci-fi." And I was like, "Well, I pitched you a sci-fi book, right? I queried you a sci-fi book." And he's like, "No, we're gonna strip a bunch of world building. We'll call it a thriller." And I was like, I mean, you're the guy that sells the books, right? Like, I don't know. And I was like, if you think that's going to work, and it did. So initially there was a lot more front end world building about how the super soldiers were working in space, and the super soldiers are these traditionally they're very small women because it's obviously easier to keep somebody smaller in space. You need less water, you need less space, right? You need less resources. And so they had these elite like space fighters called aces, and in this world, most of them were women because it's a lot easier to keep somebody alive that doesn't need as many things. And then in this story, the super soldier is actually this rare male ace, which is just different. But there was so much more world building on the front end, and that all got scrubbed. But I think the vibes stayed, and that's why it works. Like I did the research and I understood the world, so it was easy for me to write, even if it didn't all come out on the page.
Wow, that is so interesting about your book being changed so dramatically. So
Oh
aside
yeah.
from giving this a more like a thriller motif, did this really change like the outcome of the story? Did you have to write like a whole new ending?
I mean, I rewrote this book tons of times. I I wrote it, and then I went to grad school. Actually, I got an MFA. I'd always wanted to get an MFA, and my job was a little frustrating. And I was like, I should focus on something else for a little while, you know. And I got an MFA, and I wrote a different book. And then my thesis advisor was like, I don't want to read this book. I want this other book that you wrote. And so I gave him the book that would become Cash and Gravity. And like it ended up, right, it had three point of views. It had four point of views. Originally, the main character was male. The main character became female. The love interest was female, became male. The ending was rewritten. Like, I mean, what it looked like in the beginning of 2020 is I nothing. What it looked like again, to use like the parlance of our time, the vibes were there, but it is much, much different. But the kind of the main kernels that made it go perpetuated throughout every draft. But yeah, when they're like writing is rewriting, it's like this book is a master class in that because it
Yes,
was
yes,
it and I wrote it was like 5 years until it sold, right? Like it was rewritten for
sure.
years.
So you could take the first one and then publish it as an entirely different book, right?
There's they would I have to really read my contract to see.
You're right. Yeah, I probably can't do that, but
Yeah.
but like they're so like different, right? You could almost pass off your first draft as like totally different story, nothing like the original.
Well, I think it's like different in the sense like if you kind of like made sort of a hazy sketch of something and then later
Yeah,
it became like a really nice oil painting, I guess I will compare it to that. It's
sure.
like
There we go.
I
There we
sort of
go.
see it in there, It's like it's there, but then you like look at the other thing, you're like, that's the clarity we were looking for.
There we go. There we go. All right. As you mentioned, Perrin, you work as a park ranger, which I gotta say sounds like a really, really interesting job. But how does that factor into the story? Did that really come into play in terms of like inspiration or ideas?
Yeah, my job has a lot of like hard skills that we have to master. And so I think that's probably one of the places where it shines the most. Like, I'm not writing about park rangers, but it's like being a park ranger, I have spent time in these environments. I have like not that there's horses really in this, but like we ride horses, we drive cars, we shoot guns, like we do all this stuff that's these skills that lend well towards writing action scenes. And I've also my whole life been an athlete. And so I think there's like a determination and a mindset of just like, Chevy's a blunt object. She's like, there's a problem. I'm gonna run at it and I'm just gonna run straight at it and just like blast through it or like die trying. And I spent a lot of my life doing like distance running. And I think those types of mindsets like translate to that. But I've done martial arts, I've done boxing, like all this kind of stuff. And it lends towards being able to write these scenes. And I think that I never really considered that I had like a knack for that until talking to other people and reading other action scenes and being like, why would they write it this way? Have they never done something? There was a very famous book many years ago, and there was these scenes where these characters were like jumping out of a moving vehicle and running, and I was like, has anyone ever like that's how you fall? Like you twist your ankle. You can't do that, right? And
Physics,
I was
people,
like,
physics.
and it just stopped me in my tracks, even though the rest of the book, like it was not the reason to like, but for me, I was like, have you ever tried this? And so I think my job and the athletics that I do translate into that. And I'm not saying like, oh, my action scenes are perfect, but they are the scenes where I can write those and like that's my brain's like, oh, I can write to the end of this and like I know where we're going. And
Hmm.
speaking to some of my other author friends, my other writer friends, they don't have that experience writing action scenes. So I do think that aspect of my life translates well into that aspect of writing.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of like people who used to work as police officers or detectives that write like crime thrillers. They
Yep.
know this stuff, so they can write it
Yeah.
with a lot more confidence and detail and accuracy too. And yes,
Yep.
jumping out of a moving vehicle not going to work in real life unless you want to break every bone you have.
Yeah. No, it's just even you're like trying to get out and somebody else is driving the car and you're like, ah, I tried to get out fast and I'm still on the ground, you know? Didn't
No,
work.
no.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get hurt just like getting out of a parked car,
Oh
let
yeah.
alone a moving vehicle.
We don't even know. Like I could stand up and not get out of this room. It is
There,
unknown, you know?
exactly. You never know. You never know. Okay, I want to talk about Chevy Cole, your main character. What went
Yeah.
into creating her? Because as you mentioned earlier, she went through a lot of different permutations.
Yeah. Well, and this is also one of the things that I learned in the drafting process is originally I kind of had Chevy's character, Dolan's character, and then Azan's character who ended up with the name Azan, but had a different name first. And I didn't even pick like a main protagonist. And that was one of the things that I learned through this drafting process was like, we need like a protagonist and then we need the protagonist's buddies. So that was something that when I wrote this, I think like deep down, wherever my brain is not consciously thinking, I knew Chevy was the protagonist, but it that didn't really appear for many, many drafts in terms of as clarified as it was. But yeah, Chevy originally started as a male character, and Azan was a woman. And there was a lot of scenes in space with Azan's character and how these aces fought in space. And that all got scrubbed because eventually Azan didn't get a POV. Azan had a POV initially. And we cut Azan's POV, which actually made the stakes between Chevy and Dolan very different and much better because we couldn't see what Azan was thinking. And so I think for me, once Chevy's became who she is in terms of, oh, Chevy's a woman and Chevy's kind of a wayward woman and she's like sort of young and she's just really impulsive and she's the main character of this story. That was draft and draft and draft in. And her arc was sort of alchemy. Sometimes I would do a major edit and I would realize something about her, kind of like the father-daughter relationship that Chevy and Dolan ultimately develop, where Dolan's kind of like, you need an adult, and she does, but it turns out Dolan actually needs he needs somebody tethering him to like reality. Otherwise, he's just going to go live in the mountains in the desert by himself. And that was one of the coolest things was when I removed Izan's point of view, not his character, but just his point of view, how much the relationship between Chevy and Dolan intensified on these like universal themes of like found family. And that was in there the whole time. I wrote it and I didn't see it until, the umpteenth draft. So I think the thing with Chevy's character that is the coolest for me is even though I wrote Chevy, she came out of my brain, she always surprised me. And it was just like, oh, this is who she is. And I had no idea. And I can't really explain that other than alchemy. Like that's the magic of like human creativity. Um,
Hmm.
and it was really cool to experience. I mean, in between being like, I have to write this book again. I hate this book. Like, I never want to write this book again, but then I'd get another draft and
And
I'd
even
be
like the
like,
20th time, dear
like,
God.
that's so cool that happened, but there was a lot of like, Oh, I got to rewrite this whole thing. Okay.
Right.
Got
Do it again. Do it again. Do it
Yeah,
again.
which again, I think the long distance running comes into because you're just like I've been I've been running for 14 miles and I have another 10 to go. I hate this, but what else am I gonna do?
Right.
You just
You can't
kind of keep
exactly
going.
stop. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I did that the other day. I went on this very long run and I was like, gosh, I feel terrible, but there's not really another option right now.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I just
Stopping.
keep
Get
shuffling forward, I guess.
exactly. Exactly. Do you see a lot of yourself in Chevy, or are these two very different people?
I think there's a lot in Chevy that I wish I had a little bit more of. Chevy is like definitely more able to just kind of live in the moment.
Hmm.
And um, I really liked writing that about her because, I mean, it is so common for me to be like, I'm very tired. And then I like lay down and turn off the lights and quit reading my book. And my brain's like, why don't we think about this thing, that like happened like 6 months ago? And I'm like, no, and like Chevy doesn't do that. Chevy's just like, I'm in the moment, man. We're doing this thing. Maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but I don't care. And that was like, so I think there are probably parallels with me and Chevy, but for me, when I was writing her, I really liked the aspects of her that I thought were like, and they're not all good for Chevy, because Chevy's like, I don't know, we should just do this thing and maybe we'll die, but she doesn't because she's a character that I wrote and I didn't kill her in this book. So she doesn't die, but it's cool to watch her just be able to kind of jump in feet first and
Hmm.
not have to be like, well, let's do like a really high level risk, benefit analysis. That's not her job. She's just
Uh,
she's just there to like get things done. And I appreciate that.
the dream to be able to just,
Yeah.
not think about that thing you did at that party 6 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. I was in that meeting and I said that thing. Oh no.
Oh God, oh God, oh God. All right. Well, let us now talk a bit about the business of writing because, yeah, it is a business, you know.
Yep, it definitely
And this
is.
is your first book. You're a debut novelist, and I want to
Yep.
ask about just the experience of launching your first book. What were some of the big like learning moments for you?
Oh, I feel like it's always a learning moment,
Hmm.
I always wanted to be a novelist. I always wanted to be traditionally published. I always wanted an agent. And I mean, I tried for like almost 2 decades to get an agent, and I was like not figuring it out. And that is ultimately, I went back to grad school. I went and got an MFA in writing, but I went to the University of California, Riverside Palm Desert program, which is a mouthful. But it is a low residency program and it very much focuses not only on craft, but the industry. And it was and I am not like a huge researcher. There are people that are like, I'm never happier than when I'm reading a journal from like 1750. And like, that's not me. So I like did like my level of research into MFA programs. And the only one that I really found that at all even talked about the business of writing, the industry of writing was UCR Palm Desert. And I went there and it's like that's how I met my agent. That's how I finally learned how to write a query letter. While I was there, I had a couple of screenplay deals that went through in Hollywood and they fell apart due to the strike. Um, but I was not figuring out the industry side. And it's not transparent. I mean, you're looking at stuff online. People are very close to they keep things close to their vest. They don't want to give you real answers. They might overpromise, underdeliver, all this stuff. And that was huge for me. Like that's the thing that like really like cracked it open for me was like actually going somewhere and learning from professionals in a way that I just like was not figuring out. And a lot of it is also networking, networking,
Hmm.
networking. But for
Yep.
me, as somebody that was just like a writer, like I didn't even really have internet that worked that well in 2020, right? Like so I can't even like internet network. It's hard if you are a no name author, which is, what I was. I like nobody knew me. it's hard to like know like, well, how do I network with somebody? And I know a lot of people that go to writing conventions and they meet with agents, and that's like a great way. But then going through this launch, um, I feel like I learned something every day, like how valuable pre-orders are, um, how like how to talk to people about it. I am not naturally a salesperson. So, and I don't like if I go into a store and some salesperson's like, "Hello," and they just like immediately are trying to like upsell me, like it doesn't matter if the thing that I most need in the world is in that store. I'm like, I can't do this and I walk out, right? Like I am like the person like you can never upsell me. Don't talk to me. If I have a question, I want to ask, right? But don't, and so I don't ever do that to people. And so, like, learning to be like, I have a book. If you're interested, you should check it out. But yeah, every day, every single day, I feel like I'm learning a new aspect of the industry, a lot of trial and error, right? What works, what doesn't work,
Mhm.
what you can't get data on. Social media. I don't want to be on social media, but I was like, as an author, I need to be on social media.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to do
I
it.
I have a very regular posting like presence on social media.
Mhm.
And it was just something that I was like, if I want to do this, I have to do this.
Yeah.
Even if it's rotting my brain from the inside out. This is apparently a thing I have to do. Um, so
Yep.
I think
Accurate.
that was for me, it was the MFA, it was the University of California, Riverside, Palm Desert that really was able to pull back the curtain on it and
Mm,
expose me to the things that I needed to learn to be better in the industry. But to this day, I'm still like, I ask my publishers, like, oh, what kind of numbers do you want? And it's still like, I always want more information. Like, I'm always like, I
mm.
want more, I want to know more things. And I know infinitely more than I knew 2 years ago.
I like that. It's really good. All right. How about when it comes to taking like feedback? What's your advice for those who are just getting into writing? If they're going to be, if they're going to have like an like editor or a review group, like what's your advice on just like taking feedback, especially when it can be sometimes, okay, this whole thing, drop it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think what I tell people is like, what are your goals, right? Because if
Hmm.
somebody's goal is just like, I just want to finish a manuscript, I want like a first draft, and I want to like feel those 300 pages sitting in my hands and know that I created them, that's one thing. And if that's your goal, right, then you tailor how you take feedback to that goal. But if your goal is something else, like, I want to, option off this screenplay, or I want to get an agent, or I want to find a manager, then if people are giving you feedback that allow you to get to that goal, but that feedback is hard, then you really have to decide, well, this feedback's hard, and they said this whole thing isn't working. I need to rewrite it, but my ultimate goal is to get an agent. And if I don't rewrite it, I'm not going to get an agent. Then maybe the right thing to do is take the feedback, even though, it makes you feel bad.
Right. Yeah.
And so I also think too, it's like you don't have to take all your feedback. One of my professors was Stephen Graham Jones, and he told us, he was like, you don't want to take all the feedback. You gotta have a line somewhere. But like I think
Yes. Yes.
that's that's also true with like if a bunch of people you trust are giving you the same feedback, even if it's hard feedback, right? Like deep down where you keep those like secret parts of yourself, if you know that's the right thing, then you should probably do it even if it's hard. And if the feedback is if you are feeling like this is the right feedback, but it's just so hard to do, like that's something to listen to. And I think like it's fine if you get feedback and you just like can't do it immediately, right? Like it's fine to take that like quote unquote like tactical pause and just be like, I need to like sit with this, but what you have to do is restart. You can't just like stay in your like little blanket, like you can stay there for a little while, but then you got to get out there and you got to do it because otherwise you just stay stuck. So, um, I always tell people like figure out what your goals are. Figure out if this feedback aligns with what those goals are because sometimes it doesn't. Even though it could be really good feedback, I got feedback by somebody the other day and it was on a different book and it would have changed the book entirely. And I was like, that's not what I want to do with the book. And they were like, well, I don't think the book works as it is. And I was like, okay, well, that's fair. But your vision for the book is a totally different project, right? That's not the book I'm
Mhm.
writing. And then other times, they're like, you need to cut one of the POVs in Cash and Gravity. Like that hurt, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, but it was the right thing to do. And I knew it. And I let it sit for like a week or two. And then I felt ready to do what I needed to do. I also recommend that people don't do it all at once. Somebody
Mm,
being like, rewrite the whole book can be overwhelming. But if somebody's like, when you rewrite this book, I want you to focus on A, B, C, and D is something small, well, maybe go back and do D first. And then you get that
mhm.
momentum rolling. And then you're like, now I can do C, and then I can do B. But I think it should be, you should always look at it through the lens of like, what do you want to do with this project? Because not everybody's feedback is going to align with that goal. And then you can automatically disregard the feedback that doesn't. So,
I like that. I like that. Now, Perrin, you mentioned earlier that you began writing this book, that you've been working on this book for many years.
yeah.
How do you stay motivated as a writer, especially when you have people saying, "Oh, cut this entire POV, cut this whole section out of your book"? How do you stay like committed to this?
Yeah, I think there is something sort of like ineffable that's going on with me. Like I've always wanted to write. I've always written. I've written dozens of manuscripts that have like never seen the light of day. And what is going on with me is like I'm just always writing. Even when I'm like, I'm not working on a new project right now, like inevitably I'll be like, oh, I just started doing this thing. And so I I don't feel like I have a lot of friends that are always like, I don't know what my next project is, or I have writer's block. Those are very real things that, and at some point, I had several years where I kind of went through a rough period and I couldn't write at all. I couldn't read. Like I couldn't mentally focus long enough to read. So I've gone in those dips, and they suck to be there, for sure. I think for me though, there's just something always where I am compelled to write. And I don't know if that's super helpful for other people, but I just always end up being like, I'm going to do something else. And then I sit down and I'm writing again. So it's something that is some weird latent drive of mine that science can't really explain at this point, but it's there.
I get you. I get you. All right. Well, folks, we are coming down to the end of this conversation. Perrin, I just want to say thank you once again for joining us. It's been a blast talking to you.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's been really fun.
And to wrap it all up, of course, the big question is, what is next for you?
Well, I turned in book 2 for Cash and Gravity.
Oh,
So,
okay. I like this. I like this.
there's a second book. My editor at Diversion Books has it, and we'll see where that goes. But it should be, my understanding for the publishing schedule is it should be coming out about this time next year, unless something changes. But that was my initial understanding.
All right. And for the folks at home, we have told you everything. Now, here is what to do. You go to p2books.com. Great website name, by the way. I love that one.
Thank you.
Get your copy of Cash and Gravity and definitely follow the socials. Let us know your favorite parts, chapters, characters, what have you. You want to hear all this stuff. And enjoy the book, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you so much.
And that brings this episode to a close. I really hope you enjoyed the episode and picked up a few things along the way. If you want to support the show, please like this episode and share as much as you can. If you want to check out other kinds of episodes, you can find that right here. And to subscribe, it's right there. This has been Citywide Bytes, and I'll see you all next time.